From KUNC and the NPR network, this is In The NoCo. I'm Erin O'Toole. Colorado's program to restore gray wolves hit some surprising roadblocks recently. You might recall that the state's voters in 2020 passed a measure to reintroduce wolves, which forced wildlife officials to create a plan for bringing them back. That plan has encountered some challenges. So far, 10 of the reintroduced wolves have died. Now, wildlife officials are wrestling with where the next set of wolves to be released in Colorado will come from. Several states, including Idaho, Wyoming, and now Washington, have said no to sending wolves from their states to Colorado. And federal officials recently put the brakes on a plan to bring in wolves from Canada. All of this raises questions about the viability of Colorado's wolf reintroduction plan and what might get it back on track. KUNC's Scott Franz follows the issue and is here to unpack these questions for us. Scott, welcome.
Hello, Erin.
Scott, Colorado Parks and Wildlife Director Jeff Davis called this third year of wolf releases critical for the project. What makes this year so important?
Colorado really wants a self-sustaining population of wolves, and to achieve that, it predicted it needed to release about 30 to 50 in the first few years, and we're kind of nearing a big milestone for that. We've released 25 so far. This latest wave, Davis says, would really help us get on that path to that self-sustaining population. We know that all of the wolves that are brought here don't survive for a number of reasons. They've been killed by mountain lions, they've wandered into Wyoming where they lose protections, and in order for them to create packs and have breeding pairs, they need more brought into the state, so that can happen.
Well, on that note, the reintroduction program hit another snag this past weekend after wildlife officials in Washington state voted against sending wolves to Colorado this winter. What do we know about the reasons they declined?
There are really two big ones. First, they are worried about their own wolf population in Washington. Last year marked the first time that population had seen a decline since they started counting about 16 years ago. And there were lots of commissioners who said, well, we're still recovering our population. I don't think we can spare any of our wolves right now. The other reason they cited is the popular opinion about the idea in Washington. We heard from a lot of residents there who were really not wanting to send any wolves to Colorado. They cited the high death rate so far. And, there's a lot of wolf advocates there who think they should be focusing more on this endangered species in their state before allowing Colorado to take up to 15 wolves away.
So the dilemma, Colorado wildlife officials can't import wolves from another state and can't import them from Canada. Where does that leave Colorado in terms of options for increasing the number of wolves in the wild?
They're really in quite the pickle here. They're very far behind previous years on finding that source population. And this process isn't easy. It involves helicopter teams, scouting. So this is something that really takes weeks to get into motion. In previous years, they announced as early as September where the wolves were coming from. And here we are 2 months later than that with no source population and a list that is becoming quickly exhausted. A lot of people thought Washington would be a more likely place to source wolves. We've already gotten some from Oregon, but the no there really clouds this next phase and puts a big question mark on what happens in the next month or two, because they're really racing against the clock now.
In other states that reintroduced wolves, I think opponents would say the reintroduction was almost too successful, and they had to reduce the number of wolves in places like Wyoming and Idaho. Scott, are you surprised that Colorado's program is having the opposite problem and kind of limping along 3 years in?
I don't think so. I'm not personally surprised, because Colorado, I've learned, is a very different place for wolves than, say, Wyoming, Montana, and Idaho, where we have these huge open spaces, these big national parks. there's a lot more population centers in Colorado that they're traveling through. Where we've released them in this northern zone, a lot of them have quickly, gone into Wyoming and other states. So I guess knowing that this was a new process, I didn't really know what to expect in the first couple of years. I mean, some things certainly, have been surprising, but I think overall, just recognizing that Colorado and all these other states have unique circumstances, I don't think it's unexpected to see reintroductions play out differently based on that.
Circling back to that survival rate of the reintroduced wolves, what do wildlife officials hope to do to help more wolves survive here in light of these recent challenges?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think right now they're focused on getting more wolves. I think that's the top priority for them, to create that self-sustaining population so that when we do have more of these deaths, you have more packs and more breeding and they're more easily replaced. Another big emphasis continues to be on conflict prevention, stopping these wolves from mingling with livestock and getting into situations where it might result in lethal action against the animal. And that has included, this electric fencing being put up. I think to date they've done more than 200 visits with ranchers, CPW has, to help shore up defenses and create plans. And so that will continue to be probably the biggest focus for wildlife managers to try and mitigate the deaths that they can. I mean, I don't think there's any way they can, stop the encounters with mountain lions or other wildlife, or you can't tell a wolf, hey, don't go into Wyoming, it's not safe for you there. But I think the things they can do are the conflict prevention and increasing the population through these annual releases.
We talked about how wildlife officials feel this third year of reintroduction is critical. Given the state of things, is there a scenario where Colorado might halt or pause reintroduction efforts? And would that even be possible, since voters asked for wolves to be reintroduced?
That is a very complicated issue. It is a legal mandate from voters, and I think what we see from CPW so far and wildlife managers is they're really trying to keep this on track, to keep these releases going, to meet the will of voters who asked for this restoration to happen. I know wolf advocates are very passionate about keeping this going. They've been sending out messaging this week, asking for people to continue to support the conflict prevention. They say it's working, and so we'll just have to see in the next few weeks. It'll be a big moment for this program in its third year.
Well, KUNC's Scott Franz, thanks so much for talking with me about this.
Hey, my pleasure, Erin. Thank you.
Scott Franz of KUNC News wrote about some recent snags in Colorado's wolf reintroduction program. Find a link to his story in our show notes and at kunc.org. That's it today for In The NoCo. I'm Erin O'Toole. Thanks so much for listening.